What exactly is a grant writing process and how does it work? In this video, we're going to dive deep into the step-by-step grant writing process and break it down. Welcome, and my name is Josh, and I'm the founder of Technical Writer HQ, and I have over 10 years of technical writing experience. And this video is for grant writers, people aspiring to be grant writers, and the organizations that have to deal with and use grants. But before we dive into all that, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate notifications so you can go ahead and get updates from the best content about how to become a better writer. And that way you can help level up your career and work on cooler projects. Now let's go ahead and get started. The grant writing process starts when a person or organization wants to create a grant application to receive funding. So a grant. For the most part, grant applications are submitted to government agencies, private foundations, and corporations that have relevant interests. However, in some cases, grant applications are also submitted to individuals. It's important to note that any sort of funding does not happen overnight. It requires time, effort, and a well-designed process that needs to be taken in predefined steps. The primary reason for that is your grant proposal needs to reflect your project objectives. On top of that, going through the grant writing process is crucial if you want to receive funds because this is how you make sure you get your proposal right. Most importantly, whether you're an individual or an organization, it's always best to hire or work with the services of a professional grant writer, especially if you're developing your first grant proposal. Now that we have a basic idea of the grant writing process, let's move on to the 8 steps to ensure you understand in more detail. The first step of the grant writing process is goal identification. Figure out why you need the grant in the first place. The second is grant searching, looking for potential grants in different places. Then comes the audience step where you have to determine who you'll be submitting your proposal to. The fourth step is knowing how much money you should request. The fifth step requires you to set up a generic format for the proposal. Then the sixth step, you actually start to write the proposal. And the seventh step is to submit your grant application. And last but not least, the 8th step is to simply wait for a response and be patient. Now moving on, let's go ahead and explain the first step of goal identification in more detail. The first thing any applicant needs to understand is what they want from a grant. That means they should understand and figure out their goals and objectives and how they plan on achieving them. Once that's done, they need to determine the best way to achieve those goals. After that, it's time to figure out how much money you require to accomplish those goals. And after figuring out the budget, you have to work on timescale to determine how long it will take to achieve certain goals, milestones, and outcomes. This helps funders decide whether they should grant funding or not because it shows that you've done proper budgeting. An example of a typical goal in a grant proposal can go something like this. The applicant's goal is to improve lab efficiency by 25%. In such a case, the applicant will have to establish how they'll measure lab efficiency in tangible form, along with the time it would require. The second step of grant searching starts immediately after you figure out your application goals and parameters. You start searching for funding sources and grants that are relevant to your goals and objective, and the ones best suited to your needs are the ones that are likely to accept your application. There are several kinds of grants, including government grants, private grants, and organizational grants. Typically, there are 3 ways to search for grants. The first is to locate resource centers, libraries, and university research centers. So you can find these on the internet. You can just use a Google search. These places usually have information on grant-making programs and agencies. And the second way is to search online. You can browse countless relevant websites, find prospective agencies, and create potential grant profiles. Then ask questions to understand what those agencies are looking for and narrow down your results. And it may be best to mention duration and budget requirements when you're going ahead and searching online. And that way you don't have to go through lots and lots of material, but you'll have a predefined filter that can give you the right results. And the third method for grant searching is to use databases like Google Scholar. Such databases provide relevant information on grants, grant agencies, and more. And the third step of the grant writing process is to determine your proposal's audience. Determining the target audience is crucial because that's ultimately how you decide what kind of information that you need to include in your proposal. For example, if you're pitching increased lab efficiency to an organization's C-level executives, then it would be best to show what impact increased lab efficiency would have on overall company costs, revenue, and production. Moving on, knowing the audience will also help you figure out a tone for the proposal. Continuing with the previous example, if your audience is C-level executives, your tone should be absolutely professional and outcome-oriented. Most importantly, this is when you develop the grant guidelines based on existing research and the grantor-specific guidelines. It's best to follow the grantor's guidelines as much as you can. With that said, not every grantor puts up lots of guidelines. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing and open-ended, and you really have to dig in to find out what they want. And the fourth step is to know how much money to request. It's absolutely critical to understand the amount of funding needed to achieve your goals. Getting this step right is crucial because a grantor has a good idea of how much budget is needed for different projects and goals. Therefore, it comes down to the grant writer's skills and their ability to convince them of a new number. And in any case, planning out the grants and their budgets start by finding trustworthy sources. These sources should provide accurate information about the grant industry so you can determine how much money is appropriate for your project. And one of the things that's really helpful is to go ahead and research competitive grant funding opportunities to see what those funds have been used for in the past. So looking at historical data will give you a good idea of what you should be asking for. It also gives you an idea of what people have invested in the past, so they'll likely be willing to invest the same amount in the future. And comparing and contrasting those projects will ultimately determine where your project stands. After that, develop the final budget for your project and finalize it according to the audience. Once the research part is done, we move on to the fifth step, which is where you set up a generic format for your proposal before starting to write it. You can say that this is where the actual writing part starts. You should keep a few things and tips in your mind during this step. Now, first you should brainstorm the entire project, including what the organization does, how your project will benefit them, and more. Now, this is where your research comes in handy. You can't write if you don't have proper research. And then of course you want to choose a font for the proposal. You want to make sure that you have something that's easy to read, easy on the eyes, and flows well. Your audience may be older and may want more spacing, may want bigger fonts. There's a lot of things that go into stylistic choices when it comes to your audience. In some cases, organizational guidelines may require specific fonts, so make sure to take a look at that. And then decide on an attractive format for the proposal. You can find plenty of examples and templates online. Another thing to keep in mind is to avoid jargon at all costs. You want the reviewers to understand each part of the proposal so they can understand it and make a decision based on facts. Last but not least, it goes without saying that you should always remain professional in your grant proposal. So keep it to professional language. Don't be throwing in any slang in there or anything that could really throw your audience off. In the sixth step, the actual grant writing begins. Up until now, you've made sure that you have all the relevant information, data, and guidelines you need to develop an excellent grant proposal. While that requires a lot of effort, the writing requires significant focus. That's why it's divided into 3 sections: introduction, body, and conclusion. The introduction is there to capture the reader's attention and explain your purpose quickly while showing that you're organized. And the body is where you'll have all the subject matter covered, including your goal or goals, potential outcomes, and how it would benefit the organization, as well as the processes in order to get there. And the conclusion will be the ending note summarizing the proposal details. And it's critical to remain comprehensive yet succinct while conveying all the information in each paragraph and section. And make sure each paragraph begins with a point, and the sentences below it help establish that point that you started off with. And continuing to the sixth step, I'll be covering some of the common sections of grant proposals and their descriptions. The first thing you should write is a cover letter. The cover letter is a brief introduction to the proposal and project. It should contain the name and contact information of your organization, along with the project title, its relevance, and what it means to you. And then comes the abstract, the first paragraph of your grant proposal. It's a brief summary of what you'll do in the project. It should also explain why it's important to the relevant parties, what processes are being used, and its benefits. You can think of it as essentially an executive summary. Then comes the introduction or statement of need. The official introduction is where you introduce yourself and your team and the topic of the proposal. Here you set up your story, explain your goals and purpose, why funding this project right now is a good idea, and your objectives. Then you move on to the literature review, which is a brief summary of the current knowledge on your topic. And this would detail what's already been done about the problem, why it matters, and why there is a need for a new solution. After that comes the project narrative, where the body part starts. Here you include a detailed statement of the problem, your goals, objectives, hypotheses, methods, and procedures. And here you can look at an example cover letter of a grant proposal. You'll notice that it's not that different from a typical cover letter. You start with the date, name, title, organization name, and address. Then start the letter with an introductory paragraph that dives right into the point. This paragraph should have the amount needed, the purpose of the project, its name, and what it's going to do. Then move on to explain the goals and objectives of the project, along with a comprehensive explanation of the project. The second to last paragraph usually focuses on the procedure of the project, along with why it's relevant. And at the end, you can add another paragraph or statement to close the letter and sign it off. Continuing with the sixth step in the grant proposal section, after the project narrative comes a personnel section. In this section, you will list all the people who will be involved in the research and the project. Now, you don't always have to list all the people. Sometimes it's important just to list all the ones who really stand out and who have great backgrounds. It's best to add a brief introduction or biography of each member along with their qualifications. Then you move on to the budget section, where you detail how much funding and resources you'll need for the project. It should include hard costs of materials, services, and any surprise cost. And the next section is a timeline of the project. Here you'll list the beginning and end dates of the project along with any milestones. You should also report on any completed progress or milestones. Then comes a references section, where you'll include all the references of the people who influenced your project and work. And it's critical here that you cite the sources appropriately. The last part of the writing step is revision and edits. After the writing part is done, it's important to review the application several times to make sure it's as good as it can be. So check for grammar mistakes, typos, sentence structure errors, factual errors, and ensure that it all follows the grant guidelines. Because if you make any simple errors here, it can just ruin your chances completely. So follow those grant guidelines to a T. And here's an example of the first page of a grant proposal. I took this template as a resource because it's a good depiction of what a typical grant proposal can look like. Now, it really does depend on the grant that you're applying for, so keep that in mind. These proposals can vary, but this right here is a very basic template to at least give you a tangible idea. And as you can see, the project title is at the top. The first section is a summary, or as I explained, the abstract. Then comes the introduction, shown as an organization description and history. And after that, you can see the background that is practically a literature review. Then comes a project description or narrative. And if you're wondering where the cover letter is, it's usually the title page. Keep in mind that you can adjust the format of the grant proposal, again, based on your research and the grantor's guidelines. There's many other examples online, and I highly recommend to do your research on what grant proposals have looked like in the past for the grants that you're applying to and those funders and what they have received in the past and have accepted. And that will give you a good idea of the format that you should look after and implement. And now that the writing process is done, you can move on to the seventh step, which is submitting your grant proposal. However, before you do that, you should first seek expert support. It's best to get your proposal reviewed by SMEs or subject matter experts. So ask the person who has all the knowledge about your goal and your vision. So this could be someone who understands the statistics, the methodology, and a certain specialist who really has a good expertise here to give you the feedback and do technical verification to ensure everything's right and that you don't have any errors. And when you're done, submit your grant application. Whether you're doing it online or submitting it in the mail, either way works depending on your timeline and how the grantor wants to receive it. And the eighth step is pretty simple. You just wait patiently. Grant providers receive tons of proposals often, and it can take them a lot of time to go through each of those proposals and properly evaluate them. It's best to wait to see whether they approve your grant or deny the proposition. However, if there's a timeline on the grantor's guidelines, you can follow up with them after that time limit has been reached. And if your application is denied, try to figure out why. Fix it as best as you can and resubmit your grant application for approval. At times, organizations may simply skip over your application due to the sheer number of applications that they receive. Therefore, it's best to keep retrying until you get a strong reason not to. And there you have it, everything you need to know about the grant writing process, what steps to take, and what to do in each step. And thank you for watching the video. My name is Josh. Again, I'm the founder of Technical Writer HQ. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to go ahead and check out our grant writing certification course, where we dive deep into grant writing and give you valuable feedback on how to write a proposal, where we actually dive into your proposal and make sure that it's written well. And that way, if you're writing your first proposal or just looking to break into the industry, you'll have a good idea of whether you're on the right track. And I wish you the best of luck in your grant writing career, and I'll see you on some of our other videos. Cheers.